Hey guys, you know that those thoughts that just wheel around in your head and keep going and going and going, maybe you wake up with them, get a little bit of anxiety, or you're just constantly struggling with what is going on in your head. And then what we do is we go and talk and say, hey, we're doing really well and everything's okay, and we start building this thing called pressure, and a thing called anxiety or overwhelm starts to build our world. The reason why this happens is because we can't cope with what's going on in our mind. And there's something that comes before this. This is the emotions, and quite often we don't understand the emotions, and we think the head is actually doing a loop that's creating the emotional constriction, but it's the other way around. And until we start looking at our emotions in a really different way, the head loops are going to stay there. And we do something very, very different with your head loop. We actually allow the head loops to be there. It's very, very different, and we find the magic in your head loop. We find exactly what you do. I was just chatting to an amazing woman this week about our academy, and I was talking about how her head loops in her head had created this amazing magical business that if she didn't have that, I'm not good enough, maybe I can't get there, she has been really diligent in her life creating an amazing system in a business. And she's like, oh my God, that's so true. Sometimes we have no idea the benefits, and this is the reason why we can't get rid of the head loop, because they've created some magical things in our life for people who are very successful. Unworthiness is a common trait that we're frightened of that actually gets us through the hard times. Sometimes it makes people feel that they can't get over the line. For others, it actually gets you over the line. So this is what's really, really important about your head. It's not going to stop until you are willing to actually look at what your head is doing, because you might think you've solved it for a while, maybe you have for a little while, and then something happens and all this duress pops up, and then that same head loop comes back and beats you around the chops again. So what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with it? Because one thing I've learned is that working with people for such a long period of time, they're pretty constant, the loops, and I've shown people how to completely change how their loops are and how their heads spin around like a top and do something really, really different with them. And once you start understanding the magic that sits in your head as not wrong, you start creating a life that's going to breathe purpose, fulfillment and change in it. The thing is, what you've got to learn to be able to do here is actually find out the magic that's in your head, rather than try to dismiss it, pretend it's not there, and then put on a show in the world. And this is what a lot of people do. They're putting on a big show. I get to find out what's really going on behind the covers, and I have days which are really tough, and I'm okay with that, because I know those days will blend with magical days as well. But the thing that's really, really important that I want to hand to you is actually the tough days are the most important days. It's what you do in those tough days. Now, if you're reactive, you can't cope and everything's fucked, when you're having your tough days, then that's where you got to put the work in. Good days are easy. They're easy for you to do what you're here to do. It's what you do when you're having your tough days. And I'll give you a really important tip. I've had this handed to me a lot of the time. It's what you do when no one is looking that really matters, right? When no one's looking. How are you at the checkout? How are you with people that you don't know? How are you when people are being rude to you just because life right now is very difficult? So we can react or we can respond, and that's what learning to understand what's going on with your head and responding accordingly in life is going to turn it around. And this is what we do in our academy. We help people change what they're doing. The first thing you've got to do, this is pro tip number 1, take responsibility for the thing that's happening in your head. Don't project it out to anybody in the world. Take responsibility for it. Take ownership of it. And once you start taking ownership of it, then it becomes something that you get to understand. And then when you get to understand it, you have a concept that you can use to change it. And then once you change it, the head loop actually becomes your magic. And this is how life works. Imagine if everything that you thought was bad was actually what you were meant to live by. Have an awesome day.